What's up, YouTube? I'm Untitled Chapter, host of Poor Packers podcast. Thank you for being here, and thank you for checking out this video. Training camp has come to an end. It is finally upon us, the regular season. No more hypotheticals. It's about to get down to the nitty-gritty of the regular season. But we've had some great times. We've had some great memories, some laughs, some injuries, some head-scratching moments. No tackling whatsoever. We didn't do that at all in training camp. Remember that. That was a key component. But on today's episode, this Friday, 6 days away from the kickoff of the regular season, I'm here to predict, very foolishly predict, what I believe the 53-man roster will come down to. And without further ado, it is time to pour ourselves another Packers podcast. All right, now, so before we get started, I do want to thank all 535 subscribers that I have at the time of this recording. I need to remind you that this wonderful canvas will be given away once I hit 1,000 subscribers. So if you have been casually watching, if you've enjoyed some of this training camp footage, we're about to dive full head on into the regular season very soon. So if you want to jump on board, become a proud owner of this canvas, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button. I'm not going to be doing that a whole lot throughout these videos. I'm kind of hoping I get to 1,000 real quick, just so I can stop, plugging in subscriptions, and you guys can just take this and I can do something different with my backdrop. Because quite frankly, this is driving me a little bit crazy. But I don't have a whole lot of a script to talk about. I mean, I want to break down. I spent a little bit of time, kind of going through what I thought would be the final predictions of the Packers roster. And it's going to be really foolish because the actual deadline for the Packers to cut down to a 53-man roster is at 4 p.m. tomorrow. That is Saturday, August 31st. And so I'm going to put this out there on Friday. It's gonna just marinate out there in the internet. There's going to be probably, about 400, 500, 600 views possibly, because this channel isn't all that big. It'll be probably hopefully the ones that are subscribed to this channel. And then, a little over 24 hours from when this goes live, the real roster is going to come out. I'm probably going to sound like a fool because none of my predictions are going to come true. But hey, there's not a whole lot. The Kansas City game, okay. Good point. Let's talk about the Kansas City game. The Kansas City game took place last night. A few things that stood out to me watching that game. So again, Tim Boyle got the start, kind of a slow start for him. He did end up throwing himself a touchdown pass, and he didn't play a whole lot. He played a little into the second quarter when he did get that touchdown pass, and then Kaiser came in about halfway through the second quarter, had an interception, threw himself a touchdown as well. And then it turned into the Manny Wilkins show in the second half, for the most part in the second half. And that just wasn't, it wasn't all that entertaining, quite frankly. Not a ton to come out of last night's game. There were a few rising star players that I will discuss in this roster breakdown. Packers went 2-2 in the preseason. We don't care about the preseason because as of today, we are 0-0. Regular season's right around the corner. But let's talk about this, right? So first place you got to start when you talk about the roster is quarterback. So I have two quarterbacks, in my opinion, making the final roster. And my guys are Aaron Rodgers, and yes, Tim Boyle is my second quarterback to make the roster. Now, when I'm kind of going through, again, you have to have 53 men on this roster. There's about 2 or 3 positions where I'm kind of scratching my head. This is the first one. Do the Packers possibly keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster just because neither Boyle or Kaiser really jumped off any sort of film, had any outstanding highlights throughout preseason? And you'd really hate to see, Kaiser get picked up off the practice squad or picked up by another team and lose what could potentially be someone. But we've been waiting on this potential for a while now. Cleveland obviously abandoned ship as soon as they got the opportunity to, and who knows how long we'll hang on to him. But I have 2 quarterbacks that I am willing to say will make the roster. It will be Rodgers, and it will be Boyle over Kaiser. Let's just hope that we never have to see Boyle take another snap the rest of the year until next year's training camp. For the love of God, do not take Aaron Rodgers away from me. Let's talk about running backs. I got 3 running backs making my roster. Of course, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams and my guy Dexter Williams. I think it's easy to go with Dexter Williams on this one. Yes, last week LaFleur was quoted saying that Trey Carson does have the slight nod over Williams in practice, and it's kind of on the depth chart, if you will. But I would be surprised if Williams did not make the roster just because he's a rookie. They drafted him pretty high. He was one of my higher picks, or one of my higher regarded players coming out of the draft, and I would just be surprised if they cut him. Now, the one unknown with this is, do the Packers keep multiple running backs? It was also rumored throughout the week that they were searching for more running back talent. Do they keep 4 running backs on the team? If they do keep 4, yes, I think Trey Carson does make the roster, but if they only keep 3 running backs, perhaps they keep 2 fullbacks. We know from the fullback side of this that Danny Vitale is a lock-in. He has made himself a roster spot. They're going to implement the fullback position a lot more coming into the season. And then if they decide to keep 2 fullbacks, I'm going to have to give that nod to Tommy Bohannon, or however you want to pronounce it. But in that backfield, I see a total of 5 players, whether it's 4 running backs and 1 fullback, or 3 running backs and 2 fullbacks. I don't know, but I do believe they will have 5 guys in that backfield, however you want to list them, heading into the season. The wide receiver competition was a much talked about topic for us throughout the last couple of weeks of training camp. And I pretty much knew what this would shake out to be after the 3rd preseason game when St. Brown went out with an injury. Now, if you hadn't heard, St. Brown had a little bit of an ankle injury. He will be out, they say, at least 6 weeks. So when I talk about this roster, and this roster at wide receiver, I have 7 guys making the squad. We're looking at Devontae Adams, MVS, Geronimo Allison, Jay Kumaro, Trevor Davis, Darius Shepard. Yes, he did have a fumble on a kick return and didn't have a killer night against Kansas City, but he makes the roster. And I do think Allen Lazard also makes the roster. I think those are our 7 guys. Now, the one asterisk with this wide receiving group is you don't want to lose St. Brown. St. Brown is a talented wide receiver. I think he, of all of the wide receivers that we got last year, well, not of all of them, because obviously MVS stood up, but he deserves a roster spot. And I think that the Packers will sign him initially right at the deadline. I think they will either talk to Lazard or Shepard and let him know, hey, we're going to take St. Brown. Don't go anywhere, though. We're going to have to move him to IR, and then we're going to bring you onto the squad. That's kind of how I predict that shaking out. Only time will tell, obviously, how that entire thing plays out. But I would be surprised if those are not our 7 guys. I'd be more surprised if they just let St. Brown just wander off into the rest of the NFL. And I would be shocked if they ended up keeping Jamon Moore, which it's sad to say, but it's time to part ways. You were struggling to make the roster in your rookie season, and they kept you, I think, solely based on the fact that they took you at such a high pick in the draft, and you did not do really anything throughout the training camp to jump off the field and make yourself a roster spot. So I'm going to say right now, Jamon Moore, thanks for your time. Good luck. You're probably going to end up in the practice squad, because I don't foresee really any other NFL team wanting to put you on their roster. But those are our guys. Those are Aaron Rodgers wide receivers. And then we should probably talk about these tight ends a little bit too, because that's also part of the receiving squad. So with these tight ends, and I'm sure you can hear my swallowing on the microphone. I noticed that when I chugged the beer after the end of our last video, or my last video. So tight end, obviously Jimmy Graham. Pray to God that his finger is going to be okay and that he will be a go next week against Chicago. Mercedes Lewis hasn't made a whole lot of headlines, but I think he should make the roster. He's an incredible blocker, especially if they're going to utilize this running game like they intend to, and step up the running game. You need a tight end like Mercedes on that team. Robert Tonyan makes the team, and then of course Jay Sternberger makes the team as well. He did leave the game last night. He had himself a touchdown. He was the one who caught the touchdown pass from Tim Boyle. He left with an injury, got carted off the field sometime a little bit before halftime. So hopefully his injury is nothing long term. And that's one thing I just don't know. I mean, I'm filming this late Thursday night, posting it Friday. Some of these guys that did get injured, like a Jay Sternberger, hopefully don't have long season-ending injuries or anything that's going to keep them out, put them on the IR, anything like that. Offensive line, very interesting group of guys we got here. So you obviously have your main starters. You have Bakhtiari, you have Bulaga, you have Billy Turner, you have Lane Taylor, and then you have Corey Linsley. I don't know who I talk about. So I have 8 guys making this offensive line. outside of your starters, I think Elton Jenkins kind of pushes, Lane Taylor for that starting position. I think Justin McCray obviously steps in there as a solid backup. I think Alex Light makes himself a roster spot on that offensive line. And then the unknown variable with this one is whether or not Cole Madison decides to stick around or not. Now, remember, drafted last year, ended up taking a year off of the NFL for personal reasons. He did not jump out at me by any means throughout the preseason, so I wouldn't be shocked if he gets cut. But you have DeBeer, who has an awesome last name that did leave the game with an injury last night. And really, there's not a whole lot of other players that just jump out at me on that roster. So I'd be curious to see if they keep Cole Madison on that squad, if they can develop him, or if it just turns into a whole other Jason Spriggs situation. I pray that it does not turn into another Jason Spriggs situation. But if you look at my offense as a whole, I have about 26 offensive players making that 53-man roster. And then we got to move and transition into that defense. No better place to start than cornerbacks, because cornerbacks are where one of my favorite players on the team reside, and that would be Jair Alexander. Joining him would be Tony Brown. He had an outstanding training camp. He was a name that I didn't even know or was paying attention to before training camp, but I think he deserves himself a roster spot, if for nothing else, being on the special teams side of the Packers. Josh Jackson has been playing. He should be on the roll. Kevin King, please just stay healthy. All you got to do is stay healthy. Come back. Hopefully he comes back in time for the week 1 game. Tramon Williams. Yes, some of you are haters out there of Tramon Williams, and I'm not entirely sure why. Yes, he's older in age, but he brings a whole lot to the team. He can still ball, and they're not paying him a whole lot of money to fill in that role. And keep in mind that if a safety is thin, they can move Tramon out to that safety position. So he's multi-talented, multifaceted. Kadar Holman actually stepped up quite a bit in this training camp. He was someone who surprised me. I wasn't on the Kadar Holman fan club by any means. And then another no-namer that I think will make this cornerback group will be Chandon Sullivan, rounding out your cornerbacks. So I got a total of 7 cornerbacks making the roster. I think that's more than enough. For the most part, you're only going to have 3 or 4 of these guys on the field, but you're going to have a little bit of depth. And I think we have some solid depth if anybody does go out like Kevin King. But I like our cornerback group. I think our cornerback group is very talented. To complement our cornerback group, we should talk about our safeties. In the safety group, there are 3 clear favorites or 3 clear locks on this roster. Of course, I have Amos, I have Savage, I have Raven Green as my 3 locks for that safety group. And I think that they need to add at least one more person to add depth to that safety position, because that was a concern of mine heading into training camp. That is still a concern of mine heading into the regular season. All it takes is one bad hit, someone gets a concussion, you got to fill in that position, of course. So I think it comes down to 2 guys. Trey Matthews, who had an outstanding game against Kansas City. He was one of those players that did stand out a little bit last night. And kind of step up and kind of show that he wants the job, or he played hard. Those 4th preseason games can be kind of throwaway games, and he came at it. So I like Trey Matthews making that 4th spot. And then Ibrahim Campbell is the wild horse or the dark horse of this conversation. One of those 2 guys, I think, is who it boils down to. I give the nod to Trey Matthews, and we end up with 4 safeties on the roster. The defensive line is easily figured out, and I'm confident with this one. We have Kenny Clark, Dean Lowry, Montravius Adams, and Kingsley Keke rounding up our 4 defensive linemen. And then our linebacking group, it gets a little bit blurry because a lot of those linebackers and the defensive ends and whatnot kind of blend together. But however you want to categorize them, I have 9 total linebackers, whether you want to call them outside, inside, defensive end. I don't care how you refer to them in Mike Pettine's defense. But obviously, Za'Darius, Preston Smith, both those guys, new additions, got paid a whole lot of money, making the roster. Blake Martinez, making the roster. Rashawn Gary, of course. Kyler Fackrell is a name that we didn't hear a ton about, but he seems to be steady Eddie when it comes to that defense. This is his 2nd year in Mike Pettine's defense. Should bring a lot to the table. And then you have, of course, Ty Summers, had that amazing 75, 76-yard pick 6 last night. He was a rookie. Regardless, I think rookies kind of get automatic roster spots for the most part. but I'm excited to see what he can do. I think he will be that guy to start right next to Blake Martinez next week against the Bears. And then you have Oren Burks, which will be out. He will not be playing those first couple of weeks. It sounds like when he is ready to practice, it's still going to be precautionary. He will not get any game time action until a couple weeks into the season. And then the head scratcher is Curtis Bolton. How severe was his injury last week? Is he going to be someone that they hang on to, maybe put on the injured reserve for 8 weeks so nobody else can pick him up? And then Nicholas Grigsby I had on this list too. It was someone that they signed just 2 days ago. I don't know. Actually, in hindsight, did he even pass the physical? I'm not entirely sure. I'm kind of flying by the heel. There I go. I'm trying to use that saying. I'm trying to use the exact same saying I used last week. I gotta just look it up so I can say it and just let it roll off my tongue. But that's the linebacking group. I have a total of 9 linebackers in total making this defense. And that's, again, Smith, Martinez, Gary, Summers, Fackrell, Burks, and possibly Bolton. I think you got to have a lot of those edge rushers on that team. This is going to be a blitz-heavy team. The blitz is going to be the difference between the success and the lack of success for our defense this year. Just because if they can get pressure on that quarterback, that's going to open up turnovers in the secondary for my boy Jair Alexander, and you have to get excited about stuff like that, don't you? So we've talked about our offense, we've talked about our defense. There's only one other position that you can discuss on the roster, and that is special teams. J.K. Scott, you didn't have any competition in training camp. That's our punter, and he's been a phenomenal performance. He's had phenomenal performances in the training camp and throughout preseason. So I think we are just solid with our punter and J.K. Scott. Hunter Bradley, he's a long snapper. Just a name that that's a position that you have to carry on the roster because you can't count on a guy like Corey Linsley to go in there. And well, you could if I guess Hunter Bradley got hurt, but you got to keep a long snapper. These are two of the 3 main components, and then it comes down to that kicking position. And the reason why I kept this kicking position for the last position on my list is because this could be an interesting one. So Mason Crosby, I think, will get the nod over Sam Ficken, but Ficken had an incredible training camp, had an incredible preseason, and he seems like a kind of guy that can be a starting kicker or hold a roster spot at the kicking position in the NFL. Now, the reason why I give the nod to Crosby over Ficken more than anything else has to come to that X factor that Crosby brings to the Packers. So he has been shown time and time again, or he has shown time and time again, that he has ice in his veins. When it comes down to you're playing in the divisional round against the Cowboys and you need 2 game-winning kicks, or at least a kick to tie it and a kick to win it, that doesn't faze him. That pressure doesn't faze him. He has experience in those moments, and you got to take that while you have it. That's something that I think Sam Ficken does not have experience with, and that's going to be the biggest unknown if we keep someone like Sam Ficken on the roster. Now, some of you might be, asking why are you spending so much time on this. Of course, Crosby's going to get the nod, but keep in mind that if you have a reliable kicker, and they're both reliable guys, quite frankly, Crosby missed his extra point last night, which probably didn't help his argument. But if you have a reliable kicker in either of these guys, really what it boils down to is that ice in the veins component that I think Crosby brings, but he's going to have to possibly restructure his contract because they can pay a guy like Sam Ficken a whole lot less than they have to pay Crosby if he's going to be Mr. Consistent like he has shown in the preseason. So that's an interesting position. If I have to narrow it down to which cut or which position am I really looking forward to finding out who makes the roster, it's got to be that kicking position. That sounds silly for many of you listening to me, I'm sure of it, but I'm really interested to see if they decide to stick with Crosby or go with Sam Ficken. I'm really interested to see what they do at that running back position, if they keep 4 running backs, and that includes Trey Carson, or if they just stick with 3 and bring on 2 fullbacks. By 4 o'clock tomorrow, those are the answers that I'm gonna want. I'm gonna need those answers. I'm gonna have those answers, quite frankly, and then we can move on from it. And that pretty much sums up what I want to talk about in this video. So looking ahead, of course, we have the first game of the regular season next Thursday against the Chicago Bears. It's only been on my mind ever since they released the schedule back in April, and it's time to pick this up a little bit, guys. It's time to go into full force. I will be doing 2 videos a week now that the regular season is upon us. I've been doing 2 videos for the most part a week, but I'm going to do one, of course, before the game, a day or 2 before the game, giving you what to watch, my thoughts, what we need to do to win the game, and then I will be posting a video day after each game, just talking about a review of it. Where did it go wrong? Where did it go right? What were the pluses? What were the minuses? Obviously, my breakdown, my commentary, my insight, which if you are subscribed to this, you possibly enjoy. But leave your comments down below what you think. I mean, you only have 24 hours. Take a shot. Take a stab at this. Put it out on the internet. Let it sit there forever. Make yourself look like a fool. It's okay. We're all friends here. But let me know in the comments section who you think will make the roster. Maybe just pick a position if you want to. Do you think Crosby will get the nod over Ficken? Do you think the Packers will keep more than 3 running backs? Do you think they sign anybody? Do you think they have to sign anybody at that inside linebacker position? Or are we okay with Ty Summers and possibly Bolton coming back? Or are we going to be fine holding out until Burks comes back? There's a lot of unknown answers, but I'm glad I'm not Brian Gutekunst because he has to make these hard decisions. I think we have a solid roster, whichever way you want to look at it. I'm very excited, anticipating the regular season to start out. So that is 6 days away from Friday, if you were watching this recording. And as always, until I see you next time... Terrible at chugging beer. I will see you on the internet. Thanks for watching, guys.